Welcome to the Jersey Justice Podcast, featuring your hosts, attorneys Gerald Clark and Mark Morris.
All right, so Ryan Lavender, thank you for coming on.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for asking.
Oscar had the idea. He goes, hey, it's St. Patrick's Day season. St. Patrick's Day is coming up, and we got the Belmar Parade. So they said, why don't you try to get someone from that nice philanthropic club next door? So we called over there, and they suggested you. And it turns out that not only are you a board member or vice president of the Shillelagh Club of, what is it called?
Jersey Shore.
Of Jersey Shore, which I understand is an Irish philanthropic organization, but you also happen to be an assistant prosecutor with the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office.
That's correct. So it's sort of a perfect fit.
Yeah. So obviously you're not here on behalf of the prosecutor's office. You're here basically on your own individual. You don't speak for the prosecutor's office today. You just happen to be work for them.
That's right.
All right. But we'll talk about your career a little bit. So how did you get into like law and all that stuff? You're a Monmouth County guy. You went to St. Rose High School, and
yes. So growing up, I'm from Shark River Hills, and then my parents split up at some point, and I split time between Belmar and Shark River Hills. I still live in Shark River Hills with my wife. I grew up with a father who was an attorney. He actually started in the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office before I was born. He was in charge of their white collar unit. And back then, people didn't stay for a career the way they do now. I don't think the pension system was quite set up the way it is now, so it wasn't that attractive of a job, but it was a great place for you to go and get a start and get some trial work behind you, and then sort of go out and bless yourself into the world, the legal world, and start actually making money. So he did that, and he actually went out and worked for the elder Mr. Ansell of the Ansell firm locally. That's a big deal, but for the elder Mr. Ansell. And then he got into his own firm and was in private practice, but he was also a municipal prosecutor for many years and worked in many towns here on the Jersey Shore. So I sort of grew up. I remember going into the municipal courts and helping him pick discovery, when he was getting his back in the old filing cabinet system instead of online like we do it now. But I remember him getting ready for court and going over the cases, and it was always very interesting to me, too. That was also back in the day when you really had the general practitioner, which you don't so much have anymore in practice. But I know it felt like he could do anything, right? He would help somebody with a real estate closing or probate a will or defend them in court or, go in and be the prosecutor. He kind of wore all these hats, and I thought that was really cool how multifaceted an attorney's life could be. And so, when I was in school, I went to Monmouth University, ended up graduating with a degree in English. Writing was always my strong point. But, as many attorneys, I think, before they go to law school, get that question. You're like, all right, well, now I have this English degree. Now what?
I was one of those.
Yeah. Well, I never really thought about the now what part when I was graduating.
I knew law school, but I had the English degree, and I was like, if law school and this whole thing doesn't work out, what am I doing with this English degree?
Now I can speak English really well.
So, I figured I've got my father's connections. He had been practicing for 30 years at that point. And I said I might as well apply to law school and let's see what happens. I didn't really know what kind of attorney I wanted to be, but I figured if he could do it and he raised me, maybe I'd be able to do it. And it turned out to be right. So I went to school, and then we had a distant family member who worked in the office, Michael Cunningham, who has since died. But Michael Cunningham, I remember my last year of school, said, what are you going to do when you get out? And I said, well, I haven't really gotten to that quite yet. I go, but I'm looking at all kinds of different things. And he goes, well, you really should apply to the prosecutor's office for the law clerk program at the time. And I said, well, I hadn't really ever given it much thought. But the more I thought about it and the more I talked to people about it, the more it seemed like that was going to be a great fit for me to go in and learn and really get the experience. The trial work experience is something that you really can't get anywhere else. Even now, as young prosecutors, it's a little bit difficult with the Bail Reform Act. A lot of young assistant prosecutors are being put in an intake unit, and that's not just my office, but that's statewide. Or they go into the juvenile courtroom, and you can try cases there. But
what's the Bail Reform Act? I don't even know anything about that. Really.
Sure. So the Criminal Justice Reform Act happened a few years ago. It was I don't know if you recall, there was a question on one of our ballots as to something like whether or not you wanted to see people accused of committing serious crimes stay in jail without the opportunity for bail and then sort of release lower-level offenders. So what that did was it took the monetary bail system away, so there's no more cash bail. And so now it went to a public safety assessment, a scoring system where you get assigned different points for different things that are in your background, failing to appear in court, things like that. And it would basically create a risk assessment where a judge would then determine whether or not you were such a risk that you couldn't be monitored in the community and you had to stay in jail. Otherwise, there's all these tools that they can use, different levels of monitoring, essentially to ensure that people are showing up in court and that they're not going to commit more offenses and certainly not violent offenses. So that was a big sea change from when I first started, when that came in. In fact, I was part of the criminal justice reform team that made the transition on the January 1st of that year.
Are there still bail bondsmen?
There are still some bail bondsmen. There are limited cases where people can get bail, but there are that was one of the chief objectors to the Criminal Justice Reform Act, was that it was going to basically
wipe out
delete that entire industry.
Yeah.
And it has for the most part, but there are some that still exist.
So the idea being, and I started to cut you off if you had something, but like the idea was what? That if you're looking at finances, it could run the risk of being like discriminatory, so therefore we're doing away with that.
Yeah, I think that was exactly the point of it, and it has done that. It was to, I think, in part at least, prevent somebody with extraordinary means who's committed a heinous offense from being able to bail themselves out when someone who's committed a similar offense but didn't have access to those means would end up sitting in jail waiting for their trial date. So I think the idea was just to make it more fair for everyone that's involved with it.
So bail's not a money thing anymore. It's, for the most part, it's an analysis of the flight risk and all that.
That's right.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that has been in the media. That's been a lot of the frustration from people that are seeing these petty criminals, reoffend constantly and continue to be released. But the system's certainly not perfect. But I think the overall points that they tried to make with the change in the law has helped. And it's constantly being worked on. Once or twice a year, we're getting updates from the AOC that have changes to the Criminal Justice Reform Act to try to hone it down and get it to a place where it is being effective.
Yeah, no, any of this policy stuff. I mean, what's our motto? It's like law, policy, life. I think you're more here on the life side somewhat, but you happen to fall into all of them. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a fascinating policy argument that people kind of above my pay grade are probably getting into all the time.
It certainly was well thought out when they did it, and it's still obviously being tweaked. But yeah. It was years in the making, and it was Chris Christie who had it put forward, which may or may not be surprising looking at the political aspects of it. But yeah, it had great support when it came through, and I think it's working.
Good.
Not everybody's going to be happy with either system, but despite all its kinks, I think it's going well.
Yeah, I'm sure it's people like me who are like, oh, I got this guy. But overall, if you look at the big picture, I'm sure it's doing what it's set out to do.
Yeah.
But
so go ahead. You were telling about your career and how you got into it.
Yeah. So of course, in the prosecutor's office, we have a law clerk system, which is not every office statewide has it. We're one of the few that does, but it's sort of like an on-the-job tryout. Like you go and work in the appellate unit, and they hand you different things. So a lot of post-trial motion practice, some appellate work. They try to get you in court and get you on your feet and get you ready. And then, obviously, depending on the needs of the office, the offices, even Monmouth County, I think we only have 50 attorneys or so. There's not always that many spots that open up. But I was very lucky that I was able to get one of the open spots and came into our juvenile unit and immediately started trying cases there to start getting that experience. And shortly thereafter, I wound up on what's called our trial team, which is just our people that get assigned to generalized cases, burglaries, drug offenses, robberies, things like that. No homicides and certainly no petty offenses. But there is where I got the bulk of my trial experience, being able to try all different kinds of cases. And from there, I went to the intake position when the law changed, spent about 9 months or so getting that in a position where it could move forward with everyone else involved in the office. And then from there, I was assigned to our sex crimes unit for 7 years, where I tried multiple sexual assault cases, Megan's Law offenses, registration offenses. kind of running the gamut. And yeah, that was an experience. Obviously, sex crimes from a practical perspective is a difficult place to be for a long period of time because of all the things that weigh on you, dealing with victims and all sorts of different things. But after 7 years there, go ahead.
What maybe it's a weird question, but what brings someone to commit such a crime or something? Like, did you notice any patterns with the defendants or anything? Were they abused, or is this just?
I couldn't say that there was a definitive pattern that I recognized. Obviously, there's a lot of medical and psychological and psychiatric study that goes on into sex offenders because the crimes that they commit generally are considered among the worst. I mean, a murder victim at least is dead. The sex crime survivor has to live with the repercussions of those acts for the rest of their lives. And obviously there is, the reason why we have Megan's Law, the reason why we have parole supervision for life is because society has realized that some of these individuals have underlying issues that cause them to create or cause them to perpetrate these types of offenses. And they are at an increased risk of reoffending at certain times. So that's why we have Megan's Law, so that there's a registration aspect that allows the community to protect itself against individuals who we know have previously committed those kinds of acts.
Do you think it's gotten worse at all with the internet and just porn being just ubiquitous on the internet and so available? Do you think it's maybe just that kind of thing's just steady over the years and it's really not related to that?
I think it's different. I don't know if I would say that it's gotten worse, but certainly technology in all areas of the law, as you know, I mean, has dramatically changed the way we investigate crimes, the types of evidence that could potentially exist to prove them. I mean,
I guess my question is, are there more sex offenders because it's – so like if you have a repressed society, I guess maybe not, because like in Afghanistan – which is super sexually repressive. Yeah. You have the thing, what do they call that? And then they have the guys and the women are all, and then they'll have like young males dancing to other men. It's like kind of crazy. What do they call it? They call it like baki or something.
Oh, really?
Yes. I'm just wondering, like, if you have a sexually repressed society
where there's no outlet for any of that stuff.
Yes. And then they have, guys dancing other guys, and their guys aren't necessarily homosexuals, but they're not allowed to look at women.
Got it.
It's a weird thing in Afghanistan. Where if you have a society where porn is just everywhere and easy to get, does that make more sex offenders? I don't know. I guess that's.
I don't think that it makes more. I think there's always been a high level. I think it has lent itself to more successful investigations and prosecutions because, I mean, I know I've had cases where we found digital evidence that supports a victim's version, but outside of that digital evidence, we wouldn't have had anything to support the victim's version. Now you have a he said, she said. Yeah. And back in the day when we didn't have that type of evidence to support them, you'd have a much harder time proving your case beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury than if now I say, okay, now I not only have what this person said, but I also have these text messages or these photos or whatever that's here that shows what happened. So I do think we're able to discover more of the bad behavior, and it helps people believe our victims, which obviously is very important. So I don't know if there's more, but it's different in terms of how we're looking at the cases and how we're able to move forward on them.
Like I remember there was a dude that got arrested. He lived right across from St. Catherine's Grammar School in Spring Lake. I know we're not talking about any specific cases, but like the stuff's like right around the corner sometimes. It's
wow. That's got to be. Yeah, I know. I think you said it. 7 years. That's got to be a pretty draining practice area. Like.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you have to have the right mindset for it. You don't want to be taking things home with you at the end of the day, but let's be real. We're all people, right? It's difficult to separate yourself from that sort of subject matter. And certain things, you see it and you just can't unsee it. But you know what? That's the importance of taking that oath as a prosecutor. And, you're out there sworn to help, prosecute these cases and protect our victims. And it's a difficult thing to do, certainly, but it's an important thing to do. While it does drain on you a little bit, you try to separate it out as best you can. And that sort of leads into my involvement with the Shillelagh Club, honestly, because, you do need to find those outlets that are positive and can sort of let you get away from some of that stuff. So
Yeah.
All right. So where'd you go after that? After the sex crimes unit?
So then for the last 3 years, I've been made the director of our civil forfeiture unit. I also deal with expungements, firearms licensing and permitting, and I'm also specially assigned multiple different cases, so regular criminal cases.
All right. So let's talk about some things in Monmouth County. So like Monmouth County is, I would say, generally speaking, an affluent area, but you see on social media stuff, guys running around these towns stealing Range Rovers, Mercedes, apparently driving to Newark, and somehow a few weeks later or something, they arrive in Africa. Can you talk about, at least just generally, what the heck is going on with that? What's the problem? What's being done about it? And what homeowners should do to try to prevent this kind of thing?
Sure. Yeah, obviously that's
I mean, the thing is, like, you grew up in this area and you don't know the stuff that goes on. Like there's shit going on like right around the corner, and a lot of stuff happens that you don't know about it. So it's good to get some perspective about this and what's really going on, what's happening. Do they chase them? Do they catch them?
Yeah. So, yeah, it is unfortunately a bit pervasive, and it's been covered in the media extensively at this point. But obviously, high dollar value vehicles create a financial incentive for the people that are coming down and stealing them. And I say coming down because a lot of the activity that you see is from Essex County, is from up that way. And it's a lot of younger people that are doing it, but they're coming into Monmouth County. They're coming into different parts of Essex County. They're going into Morris County. They're going into Bergen County, and they're stealing these vehicles because there is a profit center there for them. It's something that doesn't take a whole lot of time, if they're lucky, I guess, and they can quickly make $15,000, $25,000, $30,000 if they're able to get a vehicle with a key, from what I understand. The key being the key thing. So when you talk about ways that you can safeguard your property from this happening, well, first off, the legislature recognized what's going on, and they increased the penalties for motor vehicle thefts that are associated with home invasions. So a lot of the pattern that you see is that people will come, they'll spot vehicles wherever, at a residence. Then they'll try to go in late at night to get the keys if they're in obvious spaces. When you go home, where do you put your car keys? Think about that, right?
Not putting on record where
Not saying, but a lot of people put them in obvious places. I think a lot of people are just complacent. They don't think that anybody's going to come to my house and try to break into my house to get my vehicle. But unfortunately, that's the pattern that was happening, and the legislature recognized it and took action. And within the last 5 years, they put in a bill. There's actually several bills that are pending right now involving motor vehicle thefts. But one of the things that they immediately did was they said, okay, whereas a theft of a motor vehicle would have generally been a third-degree crime, if the vehicle was valued under $75,000, now if you go into somebody's house to steal the key and take that vehicle, it's now a second-degree crime. So the difference there being is that a third-degree crime carries with it 3 to 5 years in state prison, whereas a second degree is 5 to 10 years in state prison. There's also some stipulated parole ineligibility time on the second degree. But the major difference there really was you could get charged with a third-degree crime, and under our laws, there's a presumption that you're not going to get incarcerated if you don't have any prior criminal history. So a lot of times young people, I think not by accident, were committing these crimes because they really didn't have anything to lose. Even if they got caught, okay, they have no criminal history because of their youth, and so now they're going to get probation and a slap on the wrist, and still will have, potentially have sold a vehicle or whatever. Obviously, the legislature seeks to protect people in their homes, so I think that's why they made the change. Because imagine this happened to you in the middle of the night, and now you're confronting this person who's trying to steal your vehicle. It could create a very dangerous situation. It's obviously nerve-wracking for the family that has to go through that. An ultimate violation of the sanctity of your home is I think, personally, I think that's one of the most significant crimes you can commit, because that takes away the secure feeling that you have in your residence.
So how does this work, if you know or can comment on it? generally speaking, I guess number one, are these rings or are these just random kids that are coming down? Number one. And number two, do they like drive through the neighborhood a couple days before? Do they case it, or do they just come down randomly and do it? Like, what do you see in that?
I don't know if I know enough to speak specifically about different rings, but if you think of it from the perspective of like, look, someone's paying money, right, for these vehicles. It's not just a one-off. It's not the old days where the kids would see a hot car and say, oh, let's go take that car and go for a joyride. This is a very specific, I think, profit-driven industry, really, for lack of a better term, that's going on right now. So I think quite obviously there must be higher levels of participation in it. And the fact that some of these vehicles are ending up in Africa or ending up anywhere really outside of New Jersey just speaks to that.
I don't know how you could, I guess, I guess we want to go into that too much, but like, I guess you could steal a vehicle and chop it down, and that's how you make parts, because you can't steal a vehicle and have it like re-registered in the state or the country, you know?
Well, I'll tell you a story. And the only reason I'm telling you this story is because it happened to an attorney who is here in Monmouth County, and I'm not sure what the status of any prosecution was or whether any case went forward, but I can tell you what happened to him, only because I know him personally. So he went to the gym. Someone followed him, and we know this because he had surveillance. Someone followed him from the gym to his office.
Wow.
He didn't lock his car outside of his office because it's a very nice office park, whatever. He just didn't do it. And so and this, of course, is all on video too. Somebody jumps out of another high-end luxury vehicle, goes into his vehicle, doesn't find the key in it, but finds his registration card that has his home address on it.
Ooh.
They then went to his home address, tossed the house looking for the key, eventually found it, went back to the guy's office, took his car. Now he had an app that tracked where the location of the vehicle was. He found the vehicle in Newark, reported it multiple times to the police. Eventually, somebody went out and looked around for it. They didn't find the vehicle there. The vehicle then had tracked up Interstate 95 and eventually was located at a body shop in Connecticut, where the police went there, saw that there were several cars that were reported stolen that were in this same body shop, and eventually got a warrant. I believe it was the federal agents that did it, went in, and basically what was happening to his vehicle was they were reassigning vehicle identification numbers. So that's how they were trying to do that. But that's an example of how this could have happened. Somebody sees a car that they target at the gym and says, all right, let me follow, and we'll see if we can get our hands on this car.
Is The Sopranos much of a thing anymore? I've been watching I watched the whole Sopranos thing. I watched it all the way through years ago, but now I'm like watching clips again. It's just showing up in my feed. Is that much of a thing anymore? Do you know, is organized crime in Jersey or the tri-state area, is that like?
I think it is. I'm not personally aware of anything, that's going on in Monmouth County, but I would expect that it's probably still going on. We just don't see it. We see in our investigation, there are organized crime investigative bodies that deal with that stuff, but I'm not seeing it personally.
And the sanctity of a home. I read somewhere that if you keep a gun in the house, that the chances of dying from a gunshot wound are far increased by if there's no gun in the house. Do you have any recommendations? I mean, I have some friends that carry. I guess you can carry now in New Jersey, right? Concealed carry?
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think about that for people that, have some dudes in their kitchen looking for the keys to the Range Rover in Rumson? Should they pull out their gun? Should they just shut up and hide and wait for it? Like, what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and legally in New Jersey, it's more difficult in New Jersey to defend your personal property than it is in many other states.
Right.
Obviously New Jersey's always been very conservative when it comes to firearms.
What is that? Stand your ground or something?
Like protect your castle, stand your ground
castle
stuff.
doctrine, things like that. So, New Jersey puts a duty to have the person retreat. You have to vocally warn them, and they have to have an opportunity to leave and all that before you would be able to exercise that level of self-defense. You also have to think about, are you reasonably afraid for your life?
Right.
You know, if somebody's trying to come in and steal your vehicle, does that really necessitate the use of deadly force?
The other thing too is like if you're having to like one thing we learn in law and civil cases and stuff and is like even if you win a case, like sometimes if you're a defendant and you win, sometimes even when you win you lose because you've had to go through it all. Yeah. And could you imagine defending your house, shooting someone, and then getting charged, or at least the cops show up and you have to now, I mean, just the stress of that to have to explain yourself, say why it was, and we all know there's a big gray area in the law, you know, and then beyond that, to live with the fact that you shot someone that maybe is some dumb 16-year-old kid from somewhere, you know, like there's so many, it's fraught with such
big time.
Yeah. And New Jersey, I mean, look, New Jersey is going to have that level of scrutiny. If you take action with a firearm, you know that there's going to be scrutiny and it's going to be looked at closely because I think the law does want to avoid those situations. You know, obviously we don't live in a perfect world and bad things do happen. And I think a lot of people would make that argument, well, you know, if it's me or them, it's going to be me, right? That's not the legal standard, but, you know, remember the cases go in front of juries, so I don't know. I wouldn't ever want to have to be put in that position.
I always harken back to when Peter whipped out the sword, you know, and Jesus said, what did he say? I'm testing you, Mark. You used to be on your
let's see.
church
I was
board.
a trustee. I was good at Sunday school. Peter whips out a sword, and I don't know.
He says
put that away.
Those who live by the sword die by the sword. So I also feel like if I'm walking around with a gun, it's just, you know, so that's why I'm not into that.
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, to any friends or loved ones that talk to me about and they ask that question, what do I think about concealed carry? I mean, it's a difficult question to answer, but what I do say is that if you're going to carry, you should be prepared to use it and know when you're allowed to use it.
Yeah.
Because anytime a firearm is going to be brought into a situation, it's going to escalate that situation
100%.
100% of the time.
Yeah.
And again, you're going to have more scrutiny. Somebody like me is going to be looking through the versions of events and looking at security footage and looking at all these things to determine whether or not something wrong happened.
I'm thinking about a friend of mine that's like big on this. And the other thing too, it's like with the mass shootings and stuff, he's like, well, I'm not going to be a victim. I'm like, let's call him Jim. That's not his name. I'm like, Jim, come on. The chances of you being a hero at a mass shooting event because you're carrying, like what I fear is, you know, my daughter would never do this. I can guarantee you that. But what if my daughter is sneaking around at the house with her boyfriend or something and there's some dude running by and you know what I mean? Like, oh, you just shot your daughter's boyfriend thinking he was like, it's just fraught with.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Like my dad was in law enforcement. He's a police officer. And I can remember being a kid and we like went to the mall and I was like, Dad, do you ever like bring your gun with you? And he was like, yep.
Well, see, that's different.
That is different.
Because
He's a
they're trained.
professional.
They're trained.
He knows if you shoot. Like I remember him telling me too one time, and I was like, you know, when you shoot, do you ever just aim for like their arm? He's like, if you shoot, you're taught that if you're going to shoot, you shoot to kill. So you better be damn sure when you fire that weapon that you're doing it for like the right reason.
Yeah.
And all that. And back to the stand your ground thing. I remember as well with New Jersey, and don't quote me, I don't do criminal law. I still have NJ search and seizure packets that I don't need anymore. But like you have to retreat almost like not even like I was running away and you should like you have to be like as far away in your house as you can be. Like you're saying, it's very scrutinized as opposed to like Texas where like you see the clip, the person's on the phone, like, they're robbing my neighbor. Like, all right, we'll be there. Like, I'm going to shoot him. They're like, don't shoot him. They're like, yeah, I'm going to shoot him. They shoot him and they don't, you know, get charged with anything.
Yeah. My mother lives in South Carolina and every time I'm down there, I'm reading the news and it reminds me of how different firearms are looked at than New Jersey does. And, certainly it's your constitutional right, as long as you don't have any disabilities to be able to get a firearm under New Jersey laws. But, whether you are doing it safely or capably is a different question. That is the stuff that's not regulated under the law. But those are the concerns that I tell, people that are close to me. Like, it's not can I, it's should I.
Yeah.
Big time.
Am I ready to do it? Because, again, you don't want to be put in that situation where you have to make a life or death decision and you're not prepared to do it.
That is such a poor you. You're like, I just want to talk about the Shillelagh. We're hitting you with bail reform, gun rights, stand your ground. But I do feel like that Second Amendment stuff is so complex to go state by state?
Yes.
Because think about like Wyoming. You're like, yeah, sure, fine. You should absolutely have whatever you need to protect yourself. You have a bear come to your front door. But like, do I in, eastern Monmouth County?
Yeah, I think, and that's probably part of the reason why our laws are so different than other places is because our legislature contemplates the need for firearms differently than does a hunting area. And certainly we have rural areas of New Jersey as well. New Jersey is one of the most diverse states there is. So
see, like in Jersey, if you're whizzing in the bushes, a cop will be on you like that. You know what I mean? If you take now,
like he's saying, it depends. If you're in the
depends
Pine
where you are,
Barrens,
sure.
now you could be out in North Dakota and you could be like, okay, and maybe cops will get there in like an hour. So that's why you need guns like out there in the middle of nowhere.
Definitely different considerations for sure.
I actually did a law review note on essentially like the almost impossibility of enforcing like violent crimes on like the reservation lands, because it's like, is it federal? Is it tribal police? Is it, the local police? And the response time, it's like you're talking, you got 6 hours before someone's there, and it's not the resources, but.
All right, back to your career in the prosecutor's office. So where'd we leave off?
So that's where I've been. I've been dealing with all the firearm stuff. I've been dealing with the civil forfeiture stuff and getting my assigned cases and doing all that stuff up till today.
All right, so we get calls a lot from, and they're, if we could, I wish we could help all the people that call us, because we get calls all the time and inquiries. And one of the ones that we get so much that we're infrequently able to help is elderly people. So they're using AI. So with AI, you can simulate someone's voice. And then they'll call. You have that story, Mark, about
my grandpa?
Yeah, your grandfather. So what I'm getting at is ripping off old people, people from, some foreign country somewhere saying you owe money, send it here, and people getting their life savings ripped out by cybercrime.
Yeah.
But
the thing with my grandpa was my dad worked for Monmouth County then later in his career. My grandpa lives in Freehold, so my dad would frequently go get lunch with him. And unbeknownst to my dad, somebody had called my grandpa in the morning when he was pretending to be my little brother and was like, hey, grandpa, and he's like, who is this? He's like, it's me, grandpa. And he goes, Michael? He's like, yeah, it's me. And he's like, I'm just talking funny. I broke my nose. I'm in some trouble. I'm in jail down in Florida. I need you to send me like $5,000. He's like, but don't tell dad. Don't tell dad. Don't tell anyone. And he's like, all right, Michael, well, I appreciate you calling me. And my dad happens to stop over for lunch, and he's like, my grandpa's running out the door. He's like, where are you going? He's like, oh, I was stepping out. He's going to the bank to get the money. And he's like, I'm just stepping out. And he's like, oh, no, come on, let's have lunch. And he's like, my grandpa's all nervous, and my dad's like, how's everything with you? He's good. My grandpa's like, what about you? He's like, good. Michael and I were doing this morning. And he goes, wait, what? He goes, Michael's home? He goes, yeah. And he goes, I thought he was in Florida. And he goes, why would Michael be in Florida? And then he tells my dad the story. My dad's law enforcement. He's like, are you kidding me? Oh my! And there's, it sounds like you're in the area of the law that's trying to do something about that. But for my, at the time, 80-something-year-old grandpa, my dad, they're like, what do we do? Star 6-7? I don't even remember what you do to call them back. But
right. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. And that story, unfortunately, is eerily similar to a lot that I hear. So one of the things that I'm doing in my position with civil forfeiture is that under New Jersey code, we have the ability to sort of track down these fraud cases and go after the assets so that they can get returned. And when you say life savings, like going missing, you're not exaggerating. Unfortunately, I'm seeing that. And the scams all vary, but usually they end up with, okay, go to the bank and do this, or take some money and go to this Bitcoin ATM. If anybody ever tells anybody to go to a Bitcoin ATM and put money into it, do not do it. Do not do that. But luckily, through our federal partners and some of our partners at the state police, we've gotten the ability to get the chain analysis software, access to that. And what that does is it allows us, everybody thinks like Bitcoin, right? Or whatever crypto
is untraceable.
It is absolutely not untraceable. Chainalysis has a proprietary software that's able to locate portions of the blockchain, and when they hit certain public platforms who are cooperative and have agreements with the federal government, we're able to actually freeze that blockchain.
Wow.
A lot of times we're unable to identify actors, but we can locate the stuff that, like, look, I know that Mrs. White, who lost $40,000 in Howell Township, I know that she took money and put it into and bought cryptocurrency with it, and then that cryptocurrency was sent to whatever address. I now have that stamp, that blockchain on there that we can look at, and if we can locate that down the road, we can grab that in hopes of returning it through our civil courts. The judges in Monmouth County have been very receptive to that, so their partnership on it has been great because it is sort of an emerging and difficult to understand at first process of how they're able to do this. But we've been having really good success and being able to grab it. And I talk about cryptocurrency because I would say 99 times out of 100, you're dealing with individuals or organizations that reside outside of the United States, and an easy way to move these funds is through cryptocurrency. And what will happen is it will get fragmented and sent out to a lot of places, and then the money, the funds will end up in an account that generally is commingled with others. So I had an investigation recently where I was reached out to by detectives in Hamburg, Germany, and out of Gem County, Idaho, that had located funds from their victims in the same account as somebody that we had seized an account.
Wow.
So in that case, then we obviously will honor whatever court orders they have from their jurisdictions and try to return money to those victims as well. But what we'll find is, if we have Mrs. White who loses $40,000 in Howell Township, we might come across an account that has $2.1 million in U.S. dollar value cryptocurrency in there, and we'll try to seize that and then locate other victims, or if we can prove that it did belong to other victims, pursue it as proceeds of money laundering. Many times, because I suspect that these people are not even individuals, but maybe organizations that reside outside of the United States, they don't even respond, even though we'll send stuff to the email addresses to notify them, hey, look, we're trying to seize this and forfeit it. They'll never come and make claims to it generally because they don't want to be submitted to U.S. jurisdiction, and probably because it's a cost of doing business to them. If they've got one account with $2.1 million worth of cryptocurrency in it, there's probably more than that, and they continue to do these scams every day. The volume of them is quite frankly alarming.
Yeah.
But the best advice that I can give is have conversations with your elders. Make sure that you're talking to them about they may have never heard of any of this stuff, but you'd be surprised the amount of sophisticated people, though, that also get sucked into it because they'll get a call and say, oh, you should really consider investing in cryptocurrency. And then there will be a fake platform, and it'll show returns. But then all of a sudden now you need to pay money. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to access your money. So you've got to pay more. It's good money after bad.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the platform goes dark and you can't find anybody and it's gone.
I had a friend back in like 2016 or so, say, who was like into crypto. And it was back then, I feel like it hadn't really taken off yet. He was like, you got to invest. And he gave me 2 crypto things. He's like Ethereum, Bitcoin. I was like, all right. And he's like, download this app. I downloaded the app. And then they're like, all right, give us your social security number. I was like, nope, no shot. And even if it was totally legit, I'm like, I'm one of those like, oh, I could have made millions off crypto. Yeah. But I was like, no way, not worth it. And just a quick aside. I had a conversation one time with a police officer in one of like the local municipalities. I'm trying to be like PC about it, where it's a wealthy area and there's a large elderly population. He was telling me about one of these cases where like they tracked, to a call center in like Queens or something. And then from there it was something else in like, I don't know, make up like Barbados or some foreign country like that. And then it went to somewhere else and they were able to, I think like you're saying, reclaim those funds. But how sophisticated and in-depth some of these scams are. It's wild.
Yeah, and when I say criminal organizations, you were asking me about organized crime like Tony Soprano. This is different. This is not, we're going to go shake down the guy at the bar because he's got to pay us off for running the numbers out of there, right? It's gotten so much more sophisticated. And the criminal organizations, they know it, and they know how to try to avoid liability, We'll have cases where people come down, to pick up. There will be a deal that gets arranged. Hey, you got to give us this much money for whatever it is. And then some guy from Queens will come down, like almost like an Uber driver, and say, hey, you're just supposed to go here and pick up this box and bring it back. And if anything happens, call this number. and it's just they don't even know who they're dealing with.
Yep.
But they're coming down and they're taking a box of cash from old Mrs. White in Howell Township and bringing it back and then giving it to some unknown address or whatever. And so that way, the organization, nobody sees it. Nobody knows that it was them. They just know that some unknowing guy from Queens came down and picked up a box of cash and brought it back.
There's plausible deniability like up the chain.
Right, and that's not by accident. They know what they're doing and they're covering their tracks. So, but unfortunately, this stuff is prevalent. It's happening here in Monmouth County, and again, the best way to combat it is to talk to people about it, talk to the elderly, and let them know. Look, if somebody's asking you to put money in a Bitcoin ATM, call me first. Don't do it.
One of the scams we see, and it's scary, lawyers and law firms are big targets. They'll hack into your email. There was some problem with Microsoft 365 maybe 4 or 5, 6 months ago, and you have the two-factor authentication to sign in, where you sign in with your name and password, but then you have to click on your phone or your email to verify it. And there was some bug with Microsoft where they could bypass that or use an old coin token, I think they call it, as the TFA. And they were getting into lawyers' emails. And one of the big things they do, we've seen this a lot, is so the criminals will be in your email and you're a real estate lawyer and you see you have a closing coming up tomorrow. They will send an email from the lawyer's email address to the client and say, hey, we're all ready for the closing. Here's the wire instructions.
Yeah.
And then the client will wire $5 million. And it's coming from the instructions are coming from their lawyer's email account, but it's not the lawyer doing it. Someone's hacked into the account. They'll wire $5 million to some account in Africa, and bam, it's gone. I mean, that is scary, and it's been a nightmare.
Yeah, that's created ethics issues as well. I don't know if you saw that aspect of it.
Of course, yeah.
I have seen that. I have not seen it professionally in my office, but I'm aware of the stories like that. But look at the amount of money. I mean, people's life savings could be wiped out by a single hit of the enter button to send that information in.
Yeah, so
it's a little scary.
It's important with wires. So when we do wires, we call, confirm, we have the person on the line as we're doing it, and we double check it, triple check it. It's very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably the solution there is just make sure that you're holding your client's hand while they're doing it to avoid that situation.
Enough doom and gloom.
So you've been in the prosecutor's office for about 15, 16 years?
Yes.
So it's a public service position. You work for the government. What keeps you there as opposed to going to private practice? Generally speaking, they say, oh, you can make more money in private practice and all that. But what do you like about that public service aspect and the job?
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's certainly true. The economic reasons are always there in favor of leaving because, lawyers don't go through the time and expense of going to law school so that they can come out and, have trouble paying their bills, generally speaking. Yeah. But like I touched on, I mean, one of the reasons why you go to a prosecutor's office, and this was true even back when my father was there, was that it's unparalleled in terms of time on your feet in a courtroom. You're never going to get that experience anywhere else, and still make money doing it, right? So, luckily for us, I mentioned the pension system earlier. Governor Murphy signed a bill a couple years ago reinstating what's called the prosecutor's part of the pension. So what that means is that if you're a prosecutor, you can work for 25 years, and on that 25th year, you're immediately eligible to retire and collect 65% of your salary. So top out salary right now is somewhere around $150,000. So that's pretty good, and you still have your law degree at the end of that time.
And you can still work too.
And you can still work, exactly. Yeah. So a lot of people will do that, and then they'll go out and they'll open up their own firm, or they'll join somebody else, and then they'll do criminal defense work or family law work.
Or if you jump from the prosecutors to becoming a judge, you still stay in the same pension system.
Yes, yes. I don't know all the ins and outs with the judicial pension, but yes, I know. Obviously, we were discussing Judge Lemieux earlier. Yeah. Judge Lemieux was the first assistant prosecutor for Monmouth County for a bunch of years. He had always been there up until he left, as far as I was working there. But then he became a Superior Court judge, and now he's the assignment judge in Monmouth County. So yeah, he's in that boat right now. So. Yeah, there's a lot of different options, obviously, in terms of the end of your career. And there are certainly people that, look, the money becomes so attractive that at some point they leave once they've got their experience. But I think the change in bringing back the prosecutor's part of the pension was an important one in getting career prosecutors to stick around a little bit longer, because that's a great incentive. I mean, for me, my 25th year will be when I'm 51 years old.
Yeah,
hopefully,
awesome.
God willing, I'll have a lot of time left to
Yeah.
still practice at that point, and I'll certainly have a ton of experience. So. So that's where I'm at.
And it's important to recruitment too, because the prosecutor's office, law enforcement, they need good people, they need quality people, high-end lawyers and stuff to do this stuff, because you guys are battling crime.
Yeah.
Sure.
And
And it's important. I mean, I'm sure you can speak to this. Look, when you have a kid that graduates Seton Hall Law School or New York Law or whatever, and they're looking at going out and getting a judicial clerkship or even getting a job as an assistant prosecutor with an office, and the starting salary is, I don't even know what it is now, but say it's $45,000, $50,000.
yeah,
But then you've got first-year associates getting hired by big firms in Manhattan that are making $150,000.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a difficult one. It's a tough pill to swallow. But like I said, you have to have other motivations for wanting to go to the prosecutor's office, as opposed to chasing money and going up for big law or whatever.
Yeah, I was going to get into that because we talked off camera and stuff beforehand. Like I did that appellate program that you're talking about with the prosecutor's office, and I felt like the people that do work there, yourself included, like they're very passionate about the type of work that they're doing. They totally have bought into that, and it really is. It's a public good. It's a service, and they're very qualified, very intelligent people. And like you're saying, you can't be looking just at the numbers and things. If you're going to make a career out of that, you have to have some kind of higher calling from it. And I feel like that's a big part of it.
And you're right. Certainly my colleagues at work, very dedicated individuals, very passionate about what they're doing. And a lot, like I said about doing the sex crimes work, a lot of it is nasty, stuff that the general public wouldn't want to be dealing with. But again, there's a reason why you do it. There's a good purpose behind it, and you're really doing justice for our community.
Yeah, that's awesome. I keep now itching to switch to the Shillelagh
I know
stuff.
I want to get
but
there. I'm just curious about the what are the hours like because when you say kids graduating law school and they're big law jobs, I was talking to someone last night. Those big law jobs, a lot of them is you're really working two jobs. I mean, you're working 70, 80 hours a week, and they're paying them like double, if they had, but by paying one person a double salary and having them work two jobs instead of hiring two separate people half the salary, it costs them more because now you have two malpractice insurance policies, two offices you have to pay for, maybe another secretary, another health plan. So if they just combine it into one person and work them 80 hours a week, literally kids at a law school in these big law jobs, what is the quality of life like? I mean, the other thing that you were describing about your dad being a solo practitioner back in the day and being able to do different things, the thing that's cool about law and having a law degree, in addition to perhaps we'll have some insulation from our jobs being wiped out by AI, is that you can take your law degree and practice kind of anywhere. You can make money in a small town. You can be part of a community, and you can have that flexibility. So what's the quality of life like working at the prosecutor's office in Monmouth County? You're fortunate. A lot of guys in this area, they have to commute to the city and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. And that certainly is a big draw for prosecutors because it's not. You're still a public employee. The hours are 8:30 to 5. No one really expects you to be there after that unless, right, the work has to be done when the work has to be done, right? If I've got a big trial coming up and it's going to take me 12 or 14 hours a day to do all my work and get that ready, that's what it takes.
Yeah.
And that's part of being a professional. But certainly the time off, your weekends are generally free. I mean, as you move up through the ranks in not just my office, but any office, you're going to take on increasing responsibility. I spent a few years attached to our SWAT team. So anytime there was a SWAT call out, I would go and provide legal advice for those. My wife used to call those 6-hour vacations because that phone would ring and you'd have to go. And now for 6 or 8 hours, you're out there and And that might happen at 10 o'clock at night, and you're there all night, and then you have to go into the office the next day.
Would they serve donuts at those things, or is that a
Generally
on the hood of
yes,
or is that
there would be some food.
Would there be jokes growing up about donuts, Mark? since
Oh
your dad
yeah,
was-
of course. My dad, 100%.
But yeah, so
Do we need to cut that part out, Oscar?
We'll cut the bail reform thing. I feel bad about that.
But I mean, so you do get increasing responsibility as with any career.
Yeah.
And part of our duties are to provide legal advice to our police departments. So the way it's split up, at least in my office, I'm sure every office does a little differently. But in Monmouth County, we have all our municipalities, but each assistant prosecutor gets assigned to a team that has 4 or 5 towns on it, and so they'll call you with their legal questions, oftentimes at night.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, you develop relationships with the officers that you're dealing with, so that it's not a burden to answer your phone and provide them with legal advice. First off, you want to make sure that they're doing it right so it can avoid issues down the line.
Yeah.
But second off, these are people that you've come to rely on, and they've come to rely on you, so you want to help them out, and you want to help them do their jobs better. So, that doesn't become so much of a hindrance. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, your weekends, like nobody's going to expect you to be in the office, writing briefs and things like that, and unless you have to again. Yeah. But those are really the benefits, and like you said, they're good people in these offices. Yeah. You like the people that you work with, and you want to see them succeed too. So it becomes a very congenial atmosphere. There's a lot of social events that take place, which is good because sometimes you got to let off a little steam, right?
Yeah.
And so it's good when you can do that with people who are experiencing the same thing that you are.
It was. Sorry, just
No,
real quick.
no, Mark,
the appellate division program, is it the appellate division program?
Yes, yeah.
So that was a cool thing where, like you're saying, you're dealing with municipal court appeals where it seems like it's lower level stuff, but then you're also doing post-conviction relief where guys who have been in jail for, say, decades on a murder charge are, hey, I want relief from that. So you're there as this, like, 20-something-year-old kid, like, this is why this guy should stay in jail. But you're on your feet doing, like, meaningful stuff. And back to the atmosphere of it, like that clerkship program, I remember there were 2 other clerks, and theoretically we're all competing for maybe 1-2 spots. But it wasn't like, I hope this person fails. I hope this person stays. Maybe they felt that way about me. I don't know. But I certainly didn't feel that way about them. It was a pretty kind of cool, like, communal thing.
Yeah, it's something that I think had been lost with the young people too because of COVID. Is that like, you had the opportunity to go knock on your neighbor's door and bounce something off of them. And I don't see that so much with the young attorneys that I'm seeing now because I think they lost part of that, during that experience. But that still goes on, obviously, in the office, which lends itself, again, to a positive atmosphere that you want to be a part of.
That's cool.
It also seems like a very community base where you're really in the community and you meet a lot of people, you kind of make a name for yourself. And is it easier to have you heard or whatever, to segue into politics or run for, because it always seems like a lot of times people that are running for office were a former prosecutor or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of prosecutors do go that way because you have some inherent credibility in that, like, look, I fought the good fight for our people and I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody becomes a prosecutor because they want to run for office down the road, but it might be a job that just sort of lends itself that way because, again, you are used to working for the public good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I as far as politicians from my office, I can't really think of too many that have come out. So the state offices maybe less than our federal counterparts. But yeah, it's certainly a trend that you do see with a lot of our elected officials.
All right, cool.
The actual prosecutor position, this is the last thing I have.
Yeah. That
sometimes can have a political element to it. However, right? Is that like appointed? I forget how that works.
Yeah, so it's interesting because New Jersey, again, in a lot of ways we're different than a lot of places, but a lot of places the DAs run for office.
Mm-hmm.
I know Pennsylvania is that way. I had a classmate right out of law school. She lived in a small county in north central Pennsylvania, but she ran for her DA's position and won because she was the only one who ran. But no, in New Jersey, our prosecutors, as they're called, are appointed by the governor. So obviously there is a political component to that, even though we are supposed to be, nonpartisan, non-political. I'm not allowed to put signs out on my lawn during election season. I don't go around telling people who I vote for, which is probably advice I would give to anybody. But it's we do our job without any kind of political motivations at all. And I would say that the prosecutors, the head prosecutors, despite the fact that they are politically appointed, generally do the same. The agendas may change based on how they see things and how they want to go about looking at different issues that are going on in our communities. But the office, I've served under 4 different prosecutors now. I have never changed the way that I approach my cases because of who was sitting in the seat, and I felt supported by all of them. Even though they all might have had some slightly different plans on how we were going to do things. So, but yeah.
Oscar over there makes fun of me because in my bio on the website, I don't know if it's still there, but I used to say I worked for the largest law firm or the largest law firm in Monmouth County, the prosecutor's office.
It's true. It is a law firm. It is, and it's just a public one.
Yeah.
So one other thing is before we move on to the Irish stuff. I do have a question. So the prosecutor's office has an office in the Monmouth County Courthouse. Do they still?
So we used to be there.
Yes.
Okay.
But they have the big office in Freehold.
Yes. We have what's called a stay-behind space in the courthouse. So it's just a couple of cubicles. If you're in trial, you can go in there. You have internet and a printer and all that. But no, the base of our operations occur in Freehold at the main office.
So I'll ask this sort of in a delicate way or whatever, because I know the answer to it, but I'm curious about it. So since you're in the prosecutor's office and the prosecutor is a state body, and then you go to the judge and the judge is there and they're all the criminal judges and they're also a state body, there might be some perception that, maybe the prosecutor has an advantage because they're always there. And they know the judge and they see the judge. So talk a little bit about the separation between the judiciary and the executive. I guess you work for the executive branch of government. So the separation there and how the judges call it down the middle and the public can rest assured that the judge is going to call it down the middle, that the prosecutor doesn't have any sort of advantage because they're always there and have an office in the same building that the judges have an office in, that kind of thing.
Right. So, we talked a little bit about Judge Lemieux, how he was one of my bosses for a long time. And, he was a career prosecutor and now he's a judge. Legal professionals.
So an judge might say, he's going to be the prosecutor. And I guess you're talking about that.
Yeah. So, legal professionals, as you guys have experienced, they're able to switch hats pretty easily. And that comes with part of the training, right? When you go to law school, the idea isn't to learn how to stand up and argue a case immediately upon graduation. It's to know the thought process. It's to get your mind trained to think like a lawyer. And part of that is, being able to advocate for different sides of an issue. So, the defense attorneys, the defense bar are they're advocating on behalf of their clients. They're picking the strongest points of their clients' cases to try to, show that we can't prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt. Similarly, the attorneys for the prosecutor's office are going through, their permutations to come and figure out the strongest parts of their cases, the things that are going to persuade the jury to find that we are proving our case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
The judges are kind of sifting through all of that and to try to make sure that things are being done in the fairest way. Also, that's the nice thing about the criminal system is that, if you're going to go to trial as a defendant, you're having a jury of your peers there. The judge's job is to be the umpire, is not to take sides one way or the other, but to be the umpire and call balls and strikes and figure out how the evidence is going to, get to the jury and make sure that it's all legal. Yeah. So the judge's role really isn't to telegraph one side or the other, wherever they came from. We had Judge Tom Scully, who died recently, God rest his soul, but he was the head public defender for the state. So your bench comprises not of prosecutors or defense attorneys, but of experienced practitioners.
Yeah.
And I think that's the whole point because, again, their job as judge is to make sure that the case is going in fairly, that the evidence rules are being applied to, that no one's crossing any lines that shouldn't be crossed based on the case law. And they're doing that by using the experience that they've learned as a prosecutor or as a defense attorney because the law is the law is the law. Now, you could argue it one way or you could argue it another way, but their job is really just to make sure that the case goes in and that the jury gets the right materials to make their decision.
And you're finding that in your career that the judges, even though they're in the same building, that they're calling it down the middle, that they're not biased, and you've probably been ruled against many times and ruled in favor of different issues.
Certainly. I would say that anybody who spent any amount of time in a courthouse would have difficulty saying that our judges were not biased. Now, certainly there are always going to be issues that come up where somebody's going to feel that, well, I got beat on that and I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
But that's with everything.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that it's pervasive one way or the other, not in my experience.
But there's an old saying, for lawyers, never lost a case. Well, then you must not have had too many cases. You know what I mean? Are there not guilties verdicts?
Oh, yeah.
Verdicts not guilty?
Yeah. I mean, if you think of it,
it's funny because you have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest standard in the law. But on the other hand, if there's a violent crime or a criminal, you got to think juries are like, geez, we got to protect the community here. We can't have this, So it seems like there's an advantage for the prosecution, at least in a violent crime case, or But on the other hand, you have the high burden you have to prove.
Right, and that's part of it. So remember, in New Jersey, cases have to go before a grand jury to be indicted. The standard there is probable cause. So it's a much lower standard of proof.
Yeah.
So for a case to get indicted that may not have the evidential support that will get you to proof beyond a reasonable doubt, there are certainly a section of cases that are going to fall into that category. And again, our defense bar is one of the best, I think, in New Jersey. We have very experienced practitioners. A lot of them have switched between being prosecutor, being defense attorney, whatever. They know what they're doing and they know how to assess the value and strength of a case. And the good ones will see those cases that fall into that category of, hey, maybe this isn't quite a slam dunk for the state.
Yeah. And
they will appropriately advocate for their clients. And if they can't get a deal that's favorable for their client, they'll take that case to trial. And a lot of times they'll be successful. I personally have lost several cases. I've won my share too.
Yeah.
But, it's all part of it. And again, that analysis is look at the evidence, look at the credible evidence, the evidence that's admissible, that's going to go in front of the jury, and make a determination based on the strength of that evidence as to whether or not, this is really a big risk for your client to go to trial, or maybe there's some kind of deal we can make because of the proofs for a reduced plea agreement. But at the end of the day, if you feel that strongly and your client agrees and they're willing to risk losing, they'll go to trial and potentially win. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It's fascinating. We see the same thing with judges, by the way, on our end. You'll have a career insurance defense judge that we're like, oh man, they're going to be so against us. And it's almost like, they're calling it fair. But yeah.
I don't want to too much. All right, should we talk about St. Patrick's Day?
It's funny. We're cracking because, you're saying how your dad, general practice, you do a little bit of everything. That is so not the case anymore. So I think having two guys that do civil litigation, plaintiffs work, we're almost like kids. Wait, tell us, what's it like on the criminal side? Because it's so foreign to us. And I joke. I mean, I did it 10 plus years ago. And if you were like, all right, go prosecute a criminal case, I'd be like, how the heck do I do this? It's wild. That's just the difference.
So all right, I am curious about this. So what Mark was saying, a person that used to work for insurance companies as an attorney then becomes a judge, and you're like, oh, they might be against us. I have found in my career that a lot of judges, I've seen it from time to time, that where they worked as an insurance defense attorney for many years in their life, and they had to say, and they had to support the insurance companies forever, and all that. That becoming a judge is almost very legally liberating because now they don't have to, and they can just do and I've almost seen them swing the other way,
Sure.
I've seen that before. And because you have it in the prosecutors where they're a career prosecutor and now wait, they're doing criminal defense, as a private practitioner.
Sure. Yeah. I would say, and it's not as a rule, but there are certain judges who were career prosecutors. And those might be some of the judges that you don't want to try your case in front of because
as a prosecutor,
they have a way that they did things, that they liked things to go. Yeah. And if you don't do it their way, or maybe they think that you could have done something differently that you didn't see, that they might criticize you for that or hit you harder because you're not doing things the way that they wanted to. We did have one judge who's long since been retired, but he was famous for that.
Yeah.
He didn't like what you were doing as a prosecutor. He was going to let you know that. And one way or the other, usually on the record in front of people. But
wow.
But yeah, they could be your toughest critic sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I wrote a name down. I'll share it with you.
Yeah, we'll do that later. I'll write one down too.
Yeah.
All right. So I grew, growing up in this area, the Belmar Parade was the St. Patrick's Day Parade. It was always a big thing. I loved it. Kids go there. Sometimes the high school kids get a little out of control. But tell us about the Shillelagh Club, your involvement with it, your Irish heritage, if you don't mind talking about that, and what the club does and how it's a good outlet for you.
Sure. So the club, going way, way back, I think it was 1963, was the first Shillelagh Club that got founded out of Old Bridge, right up off of Route 18. The idea was that there were a bunch of Irish guys, that wanted to march in the Newark St. Patrick's Day Parade. And so they petitioned to march in the parade, and the parade said to them, well, you can't just march as a bunch of Irish guys. You gotta, what are you?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you recall the Jackie Gleason show, but Jackie Gleason, in his Jackie Gleason show days, used to say to his wife, where are you going? I'm going out. I'm going down to the Friendly Sons of the Shillelagh. It was like a made-up social club.
Is this in the Honeymooners?
No, it was before the Honeymooners, I think, if I'm getting my timeline correct.
The Honeymooners was Ralph Cramden and Alice. And
yes. This was like a spin-off of that. This was
after.
the Jackie Gleason show.
Yeah. He was a bartender or something.
Right. And so he would say, I'm going down to the Friendly Sons of the Shillelagh, right? So these guys up in Old Bridge decided that, back when he was alive, that they reached out to Jackie and they asked him, would you permit us to use that name to start an Irish club? And he said, yes, on one condition. And all your clubs, you have to have a picture of me. So if you go, there are now 5 chapters of the Friendly Sons of the Shillelagh. There's West Orange, there's Old Bridge, there's Manahawkin, there's us, the Jersey Shore chapter in Belmar, and then there's a chapter down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And all of them that have a clubhouse, Myrtle Beach is just about to open theirs. They all have a large photo of Jackie Gleason hanging in the window. And so, yeah, it's kind of funny because it's kind of like a fake name, but basically that's how the club started. And so the Old Bridge guys grew and grew and grew, and a couple of them started moving down this way, coming down Route 18 closer to the shore, and they wanted to open a club here in Belmar. So they started a chapter in Jersey, the Jersey Shore chapter, and they would have their meetings over at the Old Elks Club, if you remember that, across from where Kenny Pringle's office is.
Yeah.
So they started there for a couple of years. That was in 1991. And then as they grew, the building, which is was next door to you, became available. I think it was like a warehouse and there was a fire in it or something. Yeah. And these guys bought the building and with a loan from Bar A, from Reggie Hyde.
Okay.
Went and they rehabbed it all themselves. They did all the work themselves, I think, for the most part. We have obviously our membership now. We have almost 1,800 members. We've got contractors in all lines of work. We've got politicians. We've got lawyers. We've got doctors. We got
prosecutors.
Prosecutors, yes. Yeah. You got everything. We have a public defender who's a member over there, so which is kind of funny.
Do you guys fight sometimes at night?
Never.
No, I'm just kidding.
Never. But we do get some heated discussions.
Yeah.
But in any event, so they fixed up that building, and I think over time the club grew and grew and grew, and it really became a very social organization that became consumed with supporting the local communities. I think once we started growing and getting ourselves under ourselves, so to speak, once we knew that we were going to grow and we were going to be successful and that we weren't going to have to worry about paying back the note on the mortgage or whatever, I think over time we realized the power that we had to help people, because the Irish are obviously, known for their generosity. And so over time, that grew and grew and grew, and we started a charitable arm, a 501c3 foundation that deals with vetting all of our charitable contributions. We've got events that are running, and I'll get into some of those in a little while. But the club has grown exponentially, and it's a social thing. They've got a wonderful bar over there, and we have all kinds of events, especially during this high holy days period of time.
Holy days.
And the parade is a big part of that. I think that's why the club chapter here was able to be open, because when the parade started, I think it was 53 years ago. This will be the 53rd March. The Old Bridge Club made a handshake agreement with the guys that were running the parade that they would always come and support and march and blah, blah, blah with their pipe band. And so they've marched first in the parade, I think, since its inception. They've been involved. And then obviously as the Jersey Shore chapter, we followed that. But the parade, as you said, I've been marching in this parade since I think I was in second grade.
Yeah.
And I've probably marched in it every year since then. I'm turning 42 at the end of this week. So, nice. It's the parade is a big part of the community. I like to say it's the first hint that spring is coming.
Yeah,
that's what it always feels like.
That's what it always is. It's the first outdoor thing that we do, right?
Yes.
Even though it might be freezing, we might get lucky to get a 65-degree day.
You don't feel the cold if it's a good parade day.
Yeah, generally it's 43 degrees and spitting some kind of precipitation and windy, but it's the first thing that we, as a community in Belmar and Spring Lake, all the surrounding towns, really everybody comes out to outside. The business owners love it because it brings a ton of people to town. It's the first thing that the police department really has to beef up for and get all their people out there. And it's a highlight for the town and for the Irish community. I mean, the amount of people that flood this town every year for the parade is incredible. Yeah. And even yesterday, we were supposed to have the parade yesterday on March 1st because of the crazy snowstorms that we've had. They wanted to move it because they weren't able to get all the snow off the side streets and the sidewalks in order to be sure that we were safely going to have the parade. But still, the town was packed yesterday.
Yeah.
I think at 12:30 there were 3,000 people at bar anticipation. It was like crazy.
I was joking. I had two separate text chains going. One guy's like, 10 a.m. I'm going here. Another group's like, 11 o'clock we're going to be here. I didn't partake in either of them, but it's
But it's
what's the new date of the parade? If you can just
28th.
28th.
Okay, good.
March 28th.
Which buckle up.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
And it's a Saturday.
Warmer, nicer, and a Saturday.
Yeah.
So, but that just shows you how excited people get for that. Generally speaking, on parade day, so next door we have a building that holds about 600 people. Obviously, we have so many members. A lot of members don't come by because we can't accommodate everybody. But we have huge tents that we put up in the lot that I'm sure you guys see. Yeah. We'll have bands outside. We have guys come in and they're cooking food. And it really, it's a day that goes from 8 in the morning until 6:30, 7 o'clock at night when we pull the plug on everything. Yeah. And we'll have lots of people come in and out, and people just want to be a part of that. And that's sort of what I was talking about and how the club grew. So, when it first started, it was a couple of hundred members that met at the Elks Club. Then we bought a building. That obviously made it more attractive to people. People are coming in and they're seeing the bar that was built by our members. They're coming in, they're experiencing the social events. And I think by the time we closed the old building, when we had the new one built, I think we were at about 600 members or so.
Yeah.
And so that was 2011, 2012, right? Somewhere in that time, right?
Yeah.
And so when we built the new building, we obviously took out a significant mortgage to be able to do that. And so there was some concern that based on the number of 600 members, we needed to add to our membership to be able to make sure that we were going to comfortably cover that. So we increased membership incrementally over time to the point where we got where we are now. And so now, the dues it was $100 when I first joined. It's $150 a year now. So it's very, very inexpensive to be a part of it. And you can go in there and you can be as involved or as little involved as you want to. There's always something going on over there. But now, I know I talked about some different events that we do. The one that we have coming up now, I think, is on April 18th, is our Plunge for Autism.
Okay.
We started that the last few years in partnership with the people down at DJ's. And so this is the 5th year now, I believe, of the Plunge. the last few years, we've exceeded $100,000 in donations each year for that.
Wow.
And they all go to, and this is part of what our foundation does that vets our charities, they all go to local grassroots organizations. So we're not funding the big national brands that have high overhead. We're trying to really directly get money to people that are going to be able to use it and directly impact our communities. And so that's just one example of, the good things that the club does and that people have really taken hold to.
So when people donate to your organization for purposes of helping out others, the money actually goes to the people that's going to be helped. It doesn't go to some big bureaucracy to run the thing.
Yeah, that's the goal. We do a Thanksgiving food drive where we give out 260 complete meals to different people, but we get lists from the food pantries. We're not even going through fulfill all the time, because they do have some overhead, and that's our Monmouth County Food Bank. But the West Belmar Food Pantry, we'll deal with the people in.
Are there people right around here that need food?
There are, yeah.
I remember being a kid in high school and going to, my dad worked with Wall, and I went to the Wall Food Pantry. There was a girl in one of my classes. I was like, "Oh, you're volunteering here too?" And she was like, "Yeah." No. And she was getting stuff from the food pantry. So it is
Yeah, it's kind of surprising. But the need is there. We've recognized that need, and we're, as an organization, trying to do our part to try to address the needs of our community. A lot of things that we do are things that we don't even sort of publicize. Somebody has a fire in town. Somebody's in the hospital, not able to work. We'll find people like that and directly get them help directly.
A friend of mine's a Catholic priest, and I was talking to him, and he was saying that the different organizations, the different churches will coordinate so that there's not abuse in the sense that someone's coming for a handout, and wait, they're like a professional handouter, taker, whatever. So then they'll communicate the churches and the Protestant church just to make sure that the money's going to it shows that there's not a scammer coming in. So that kind of thing's important.
Yeah, and that's definitely part of what we do with our foundation, the board. I mean, a couple of the guys on there are ex-state troopers.
Yeah.
These are people that are former Judge Neefsey, if you remember him.
Yeah.
He's on our foundation board. These are people who are looking closely at what we're doing, in our support and making sure that we're, not being taken advantage of by those kind of things too.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's good about grassroots organizations like that and with the boots on the ground as opposed to, some government, where, a government, social program, so to speak.
We were, again, talking a little bit before the episode. I know a few individuals who are in the Shillelagh, and I have a buddy that lives down the street from me. I think he's 27, 28 years old, and I'm like, what do you do? You're in your 20s. What do you do? He is so passionate about the Shillelagh. Yeah. He loves it. He loves the causes, the things they're doing. And it's not just because you can, pop in there and get a $3 or $4 Guinness on a Friday night. It sounds like you guys are really doing some great stuff.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, obviously there's a significant social component to it. I mean, just yesterday we had Pat Roddy playing inside. It was, belting out Bruce Springsteen songs, and people were having a great time. The place was packed. But then there's also the events that we do. We do a 5K out here that starts just up the street from the office here.
I'll be doing that one.
Yep. And so, that raises money that supports the foundation. Yeah. Obviously, the Christmas toy drive is just incredible, the amount of toys that they're able to raise. And again, those go to local organizations, 180 Turning Lives Around, which is a domestic violence shelter. All the local hospitals, they'll send us wish lists with specific things that they're looking for. And we actually go out to Walmart. Walmart opens early for us the one day, and we go in, and for about an hour and a half or 2 hours, I think we had 40 or 50 guys that just were clearing out the toy shelves. Wow. So it's really good. And those are, it's a team effort to do it. So it doesn't all fall on one person, but it's something that everybody gets to feel good about, so I think that's what draws a lot of people to it.
We joke too. I see out my window at in the office. It faces directly to the Shillelagh. So I'll see, like you're saying, the toy drive. It must be. Yeah. It's pouring rain, and you got a guy in a Santa suit getting on a little minibus, and guys filing in behind him. So yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, and we have a lot of fun doing those things too. I mean, don't get me wrong; they're great things to do, and we're happy to help the community. But we also have a lot of fun doing it. So
awesome. We'll put your do you know the website offhand? We'll put it in the show notes so they could get it, but it's
give the spelling for
exactly.
That should be on the membership test. I say that every screening. You got, all right, get your pen out now. We got to spell Shillelagh Club.
Literally yesterday, I texted my buddy. I go, "Is the Shillelagh doing anything? You know, at the parade being?" And I've probably spelled Shillelagh 50 different ways. None of them right, but
yeah, it's a tough spell, but if you Google FSOS Jersey Shore, it'll lead you right to it. So that's
awesome.
That's the easy way to do it.
All right, cool. Well,
do you want to hit his Irish heritage? Anything about that before we wrap up?
It's up to you. It's up to you. It's up to you.
I joke, and I feel like this comes out more often, but I'm a little bit of everything. I'm Scotch, Dutch, German, Irish. Been to Ireland, beautiful place. You were telling us a kind of cool story.
So my dad's side are almost all Irish. My mom's side has a little bit of Irish, but then a little bit of a lot of other things too. But being raised here at the Jersey Shore, we're on the Irish Riviera, right? Yep. So, and I like to say St. Patrick's Day, especially Parade Day, they're not really for us, for the Irish, but they're for all the other people that want to be Irish that day, right? So Parade Day has always sort of been looked at like that by me, but it is a great time to showcase our Irish heritage, and that's part of what the club tries to do. I mean, I've got the uniform on here today. I did not wear this to the office this morning, but there's 800 of us, marching down Main Street from just our chapter in this outfit.
Wow.
And it's incredible. We have our pipes and drums that leads us down Main Street, and then at the end of the parade, they separate and they play Amazing Grace while all 800 of us march through. And I don't know how many iterations of that final verse they have to go through, but it's a lot. But yeah, it's a great thing, and that's part of the rule over there. Is if you want to join the club, you got to be at least an eighth Irish. Mm-hmm. So everybody has that shared, Irish identity and Irish culture over there, and some people get into that more than others. It's sort of, you can make what you want of it. Like I said about the club, you can be as involved or as little as involved as you want. I mentioned Judge Neefsey. Judge Neefsey, he was teaching classes at Seton Hall on Irish culture. He writes for the Irish Echo, which is the Irish newspaper in New Jersey. But he also writes a column for us in our newsletter every month. And I don't know what number he's up to. I think it might be like 160 or something. But he started doing this, and he numbers his columns. And every month you get a different piece of what started off as Irish history, and now it's moved into Irish American history. Wow. In fact, he just worked on something for me with the 250th anniversary coming up about quotes about the Irish involvement in the Revolutionary War. So, really interesting cultural stuff that goes on there. Like I say, we like to have a good time, but there's also a lot of stuff that goes on there. We have it was formerly called the Irish American Cultural Institute, used to host its meetings at our place. They've now, I don't even know what they've changed to, but there's a different organization now, but it's generally the same people that are running, and they're still doing that kind of thing here at the Shillelagh Club. So there is a significant cultural component to it. And, again, I'm a lot Irish. I look a lot Irish. My dermatologist would tell you how Irish I am after lifeguarding for so long. I was telling you guys this story, and it really, my father loves telling this story, but I'll tell you as brief a version as I can of it. So my father's also an attorney. He's a solo practitioner, and he's in semi-retirement now is what I would call it. Yeah. He wouldn't tell you the same thing, but he's semi-retired. So one day out of the blue, he gets a package in the mail from a law firm in New York City, basically saying, look, you've got a person who died that was related to you that had some money, and we're going to do all the work for you. Just sign this piece of paper saying that we'll give up 35% of it.
And they'll put it into crypto and
whatever. Right. So he shows me the packet, and I look through it, and he says, "What do you think? You think this is legitimate?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "They have obviously done a lot of work on this just to be able to locate you." I said, "But there's a process that's going to have to go on here." And he goes, "Well, you think we should just sign it and send it to him and let him do it?" I said, "Well, you're semi-retired." And I said, "I'm an attorney." I said, "I feel like together we could figure this out." And so we did. And we went through a lot of our genealogy. I mean, he did a lot of this work, but he spent an awful lot of time going through genealogy. And we found people that were related to us that we didn't know existed that are literally all over the world. And as a result of that, you know, he was able to work through the estate and get all the people that needed to be taken care of out of the estate. Unfortunately, this guy who died, he would have been like a great uncle to me. It sounds like one of those situations which were not uncommon in the past, where part of the family had split off for whatever reason, whether it be financial or whatever. And him and his brother lived alone in an apartment in Jersey City. His brother predeceased him. He had no wife, no children, no other relatives that we could tell that weren't similarly, you know, spread across the world as we were. But, you know, I remember going up to the apartment and looking. I mean, this was an old school guy who was a longshoreman. You know, he had an annuity or a pension that he had earned, but he also, like, you could tell, like, shoe boxes of cash, right?
Wow.
You know, like he was holding on to stuff because he was old school. And unfortunately, he died alone in the apartment. We didn't know he even existed. But through going through that experience of, you know, going through the estate, finding all these people, having conversations with people who we'd never met. Some of them, as you can imagine, were like, "Who are you?" You know.
Yeah.
But no, it really became an experience where we felt like we got to know this guy who we never knew, and because of that, you know, all right, now somebody's telling you, "Here's this person that died. You never knew them. Here's this money." You know, it's their money. But because we got to know, you know, he had a lot of stuff that was Irish cultural stuff in his apartment, and you could tell, like, you know, he was proud of his heritage. So. My dad came up with a plan that instead of, you know, giving us money that we were going to go blow on something stupid, that he was going to take, you know, his part of the family to Ireland, because none of us had ever been. Well, in doing his research, this was a surprise. We didn't know it until we got there. But he located the town that our great-great-great-grandparents had gotten married in 1809 or something like that. Our family ancestry is Roach and McMahon's out of County Cork. And the town that they got married in was called Boudevant. Never heard of this. You would never find it on a tourist map. Yeah. I mean, there's literally a pub and maybe a gas station, and that's about it. And a church, of
Petrol
course.
station.
And a church. But so we go to the church, and we're walking around looking at all the graves of all our ancestors. You can tell their names are there. And he had it lined up where my 2-year-old nephew, my sister's kid, was going to get baptized in the church. We didn't really know it until we were there, but he had it all arranged with the priest, and they did it. And in reality, it was more like an exorcism, the way the kid was screaming at 2 years old. But it was really, I think, a beautiful tribute to, you know, our Uncle Tom that we had never met. But we were able to learn more about our cultural identity, you know, based on what he earned over a lifetime. So. It was really quite an experience, and you know, I'm sure my 2-year-old nephew doesn't remember it. Maybe he does a little bit, but we certainly have the photos and the videos that he'll have that for a lifetime as well, and he'll be able to say that, hey, you know, my really far removed great-great-grandparents now, were married in this church where I was baptized. So.
Yeah, that's cool. My father's side, his mother came from Belfast, and his father's father came from like Tipperary. And I went to Belfast and did the whole thing, and it was almost like a spiritual experience. It's weird, though. You know, you can really go down a rabbit hole with that ancestry stuff. And ultimately what I concluded is I'm less concerned about, you know, where my ancestors came from instead of, like, where I'm going, you know. Yeah. So, but it's cool. Ireland's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And certainly, I mean, look, the Irish diaspora here in the United States, people are far removed from their heritage, and it hasn't really been that long in terms of actual time, if you really break it down. But, you know, organizations like the Shillelagh Club are great because you get to hold on to some of that. Yeah. You know, we have Irish music in there a few times a year. You know, all of our parties, you know, we have a halfway to St. Patrick's Day party. You can't get enough of it, right? But
a quarter of the way there.
Yeah.
An eighth of the way party.
And there's constantly somebody coming to or going from Ireland. You know, we have people, a guy just retired and bought a flat in Galway, and he's going over there a couple times a year now. So you really do have close connections to it. And, you know, the club provides that opportunity to keep that going. And no better place than the Irish Riviera, right?
Yeah, it's awesome, man. It's doing great stuff for the community. I know that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was joking around before about my genealogy. I'm definitely at least 1/8 Irish if you get my application.
Yeah.
But we're just, Mark, if you're not, just do it on St. Patrick's Day. Fly,
Yeah,
'cause,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
everyone's Irish on St. Patrick's
I,
Day.
good
I-
point.
I do say there's no blood test, there's no lie detector.
I
or
do
anything
have
like
a
that.
I do have a Belmar parade. Kiss me, I'm from Belmar, or I'm
Yeah.
Irish.
It's
something.
really, truly at this point, it's more about the mindset. It's more
Yeah.
about the attitude and wanting to be involved in something. I mean, look, we have waiting lists for membership. And
Wow.
It's just, it's wild how much this club has taken off, even in the time since I've joined. Like I said, I joined just at the close of the old building with about 600 members, and we've increased 1,200 now, and now I'm the vice president of the club.
Wow.
It's really been incredible. And part of the reason why I've committed so much time and energy to it is because, like most people who come in there, look, you see the building, right? You see the tent go up in the parking lot. You hear Pat Roddy. You go over for a $2 beer, and that's all great. And then you see what's actually going on.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you see all the good that the club does for the community. And that's what really made me want to get involved in it, because it's not only an outlet for me from my professional life, because dealing with the management of the club is significantly different
Sure.
than my law practice.
Yeah.
But it coming from a Catholic education, being raised in that type of environment, doing good for others without really doing anything for yourself is important to me. And I'm able to do that while enjoying it with a great group of people over there. So
That's awesome.
Awesome. Ryan Lavender, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your public service to the community at the prosecutor's office, and your other public service to community with the Friendly Sons of the Shillelagh, the Jersey Shore.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
big
you.
time. Thanks a lot.